Amelia stood by the tall windows of their luxurious penthouse apartment, her hands gently resting on the swell of her 7-month belly. The city lights sparkled below like a sea of diamonds, and the warm golden glow of the chandeliers bathed the living room in a calm, serene light. Everything about her life looked perfect from the outside. She was married to Ethan Blackwood, a millionaire entrepreneur known not only for his business empire but also for his charm and elegance. People adored their union. Society pages often praised them as the golden couple. Elegant, powerful, unshakably in love. But behind the marble floors and designer curtains, Amelia felt something quietly cracking. Ethan had once been warm, attentive, and fiercely loving. He'd talk to her belly every night, promising their unborn daughter a world full of adventure, love, and laughter. He used to call her his miracle, his muse. But lately, that sweetness had turned cold. His touches were brief and mechanical. His kisses, rare and rushed. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. And when she asked him simple questions, like where he'd been or why he hadn't picked up her calls, he answered with an edge of irritation that left her speechless. She tried to reason with herself. Maybe she was just being emotional. Pregnancy hormones could play cruel tricks on a woman's heart. That's what Ethan said when she brought it up, gently, fearfully. "You're overthinking things, babe," he'd whisper, brushing her hair back with a forced tenderness. "You're just tired." But no matter how many times he said it, the ache in her chest only grew. Then came the signs. A faint trace of perfume on his shirt, nothing she wore. Odd late-night texts that made him quickly turn his phone face down. Business trips that weren't on his calendar. Conversations that stopped when she entered the room. Her intuition screamed, but no one believed her. Her friends told her to relax, to focus on the baby, to be grateful. After all, what woman wouldn't want a life like hers? But Amelia knew, deep down, that something was terribly wrong. And as she pressed her hand protectively against her stomach, she promised herself and her unborn child that no matter how beautiful the illusion looked, she would uncover the truth, even if it shattered everything. It started with a folded piece of paper wedged between the pages of Ethan's favorite business journal. Amelia hadn't been snooping, at least, that's what she told herself. She had been tidying up the study, dusting around the scattered documents and unopened mail. But when the folded receipt fluttered to the floor, she couldn't help but glance at it. Her eyes landed on the name of a 5-star French restaurant downtown. A place they hadn't visited in over a year. The bill totaled over $500, champagne, oysters, caviar, and a dessert platter with a message scrawled in chocolate, "To us." The date was just a week ago. Amelia hadn't even known Ethan was out that evening. He'd told her he was working late, preparing for a pitch. The second receipt came 2 days later, this time, tucked into his car's center console. A jewelry boutique. One of the most exclusive in the city. The purchase, a delicate gold necklace with a diamond pendant. It wasn't for her. No gift had been presented. No box had appeared on her dresser. When she'd asked Ethan casually about his evening that night, he'd barely looked up from his phone, mumbling something about client meetings and market stress. The unease inside her began to twist into something colder. He was becoming more distant, and not just emotionally. He left earlier, returned later, and often didn't answer her calls or texts until hours later, sometimes not at all. "Back-to-back meetings," he'd say. "I'm building a legacy for our daughter." The guilt in his voice wasn't guilt, it was practiced patience. Like he was dealing with a fragile child. Desperate for clarity, Amelia confided in Lena, her oldest and dearest friend. Lena, fiery and sharp-tongued, didn't hide her concern. "This doesn't sound like work," she said, her expression dark. "You need to find out what's going on. But be smart, Amelia. Be careful. If he's hiding something, you deserve to know, but don't let it blindside you. Think of the baby." Amelia nodded, trying to swallow the knot of fear forming in her throat. She didn't want to believe Ethan could be unfaithful. Not him. Not the man who used to read poetry to her in bed, who cried the first time they heard their baby's heartbeat. Then came the night she couldn't forget. It was almost midnight. She had gotten up to use the bathroom when she heard Ethan's voice down the hall. Soft, gentle, tender. She paused near the slightly ajar door of his study. His voice drifted out in a whisper she hadn't heard directed at her in months. "Can't wait to see you again. I miss the way you laugh." Amelia stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might wake the baby. Her mind raced, refusing to accept what her ears were hearing. That voice, that tone, it wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to someone else now. And in that moment, the whisper of doubt became a scream that echoed through her soul. The tension in Amelia's chest became unbearable, an invisible weight pressing down on her every moment Ethan wasn't home, or worse, when he was. Her days felt like slow torture, her mind racing through possibilities she never wanted to consider. But with every unanswered question, every distant glance, the truth began circling her like a hawk. She had to know. She couldn't live in this uncertainty any longer. So one gray Thursday afternoon, she called Lena. "I need your help," she whispered into the phone, her voice shaking. "I need to follow him. I need to see it with my own eyes." Lena didn't hesitate. "I'm picking you up in 15. Amelia dressed in black leggings and a hoodie that loosely hugged her baby bump, tying her hair back beneath a cap. As Lena drove quietly through the city streets, both women barely spoke. The silence was thick with dread and fear. Ethan had told Amelia he had a client dinner that evening, and Lena had pulled up the restaurant's location from a GPS tracking app she helped install on his car days earlier. They parked discreetly across the street, hearts pounding in unison. A luxury black sedan pulled up 15 minutes later, and Ethan stepped out wearing a suit Amelia hadn't seen him put on. He wasn't alone. A woman followed. Tall, graceful, and dressed in a silk gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her laughter rang out like wind chimes, and her hand slipped into Ethan's so naturally, so comfortably, that it made Amelia's breath hitch. Juliana. She was beautiful in a way that stabbed. Long, flowing hair. Red lips. Effortless elegance. The kind of woman who hadn't carried a child inside her. The kind who walked with heels and flirted without a care in the world. Amelia's hands clenched in her lap. Her throat burned. Her husband, the man who once swore she was his whole world, was laughing like a schoolboy with this stranger. Juliana leaned in as they walked through the restaurant doors, her fingers brushing against Ethan's chest. He didn't pull away. "I need to get out of here," Amelia choked, turning away. Lena gently drove her home, avoiding questions. Amelia said nothing. That night, when Ethan returned home and crawled into bed beside her like nothing had happened, she tried. She turned to him softly and asked how the dinner went. "Fine. Just business," he said, not meeting her eyes. She asked if anyone else had joined. He shook his head. "Just me and the client." Her chest ached. Her voice barely held steady. "Are you sure there's nothing you're not telling me, Ethan?" That's when he snapped. His mask of calm cracked. "You're being paranoid again," he said, irritated. "This isn't healthy, Amelia. You need to stop making things up in your head." He kissed her forehead and turned away, falling asleep within minutes. But Amelia lay wide awake, the image of Juliana's hand in Ethan's burning into her mind. The truth was there. She'd seen it. But now, she needed proof, undeniable, unforgivable proof. Days turned into weeks, and while Ethan acted like nothing had changed, Amelia's quiet war had begun. She moved like a shadow through their home, calm on the outside, storming within. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact she couldn't unsee. And now, it was time to gather the truth in a way that couldn't be denied. One night, curled up on the edge of her bed with a pillow propped beneath her aching back, Amelia opened Instagram and typed in a name she never thought she'd search, Juliana Voss. The account was public, and the photos were everything Amelia feared and expected. Juliana was beautiful, confident, and unapologetically bold. But what stopped Amelia cold were the subtle hints, the restaurant backgrounds, the luxury hotel balconies, the branded wine glasses. She recognized the decor from the receipts she'd found. The caviar dish from the French place. The private cabana from the spa resort Ethan had visited for business. And the necklace, glittering just above Juliana's collarbone in a selfie captioned, "Some gifts are sweeter than words." That necklace. The one Amelia never received. She began documenting everything. Screenshot after screenshot. Photo captions. GPS logs from the tracker. Credit card statements with exact timestamps matched against Juliana's posts. It was all aligning like puzzle pieces she hadn't wanted to connect. And each piece was a dagger to her heart. Lena, ever the loyal confidant, helped her organize the evidence. "We're not confronting him until we have everything," she said firmly. "If you want to expose him, make sure there's no escape." Then, another clue surfaced: Ethan's upcoming charity gala. It was an annual event his company hosted to raise money for underprivileged children. A grand, glittering night full of celebrities, donors, and press. Amelia had always attended by his side, proudly pregnant this year, ready to support his work. But this time, there was no invitation for her. When she gently brought it up over breakfast, Ethan gave a practiced smile. "I figured you'd be too tired to go. I didn't want you to stress. We can have a quiet night at home instead." Amelia nodded but said nothing. Later, when he left for work, she searched his office and found the guest list tucked in a folder. Her name wasn't there, but Juliana's was. Listed under a fake title, Executive Liaison. The betrayal was no longer personal. It was public now. He was flaunting the other woman in front of the very people who once praised Amelia as the heart of his success. And yet, he still kissed her on the cheek each morning, still called her love, still came home to sleep beside her, pretending nothing was broken. But Amelia was no longer in denial. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a double life. One where she was the placeholder, and Juliana was the fantasy. And if Ethan wanted a performance, he'd soon get one. Center stage, under the brightest lights, with the whole world watching. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air as Amelia sat nervously in the examination room, her hands gently resting on her swollen belly. The rhythmic sound of the fetal heart monitor echoed through the room, a reminder that her baby was still thriving despite the storm that raged inside her. But her own body was not doing as well. Her blood pressure was elevated. Her heartbeat too fast. The doctor frowned as he reviewed the charts. "You're under a lot of stress," he said gently, his tone cautious but concerned. "This level of anxiety isn't good for the baby, or for you. Are you getting enough rest? Eating properly?" Amelia forced a tight smile. "I'm trying." He paused, clearly reading between the lines. "Try harder," he said. "Whatever's causing this, you need to avoid it. You're already carrying more than just your baby. Don't carry the weight of emotional trauma, too. It could lead to complications." Tears stung the back of her eyes, but she nodded. The words echoed through her as she walked out of the clinic into the sunlight. Avoid stress. How could she, when every corner of her life screamed betrayal? She could barely breathe without feeling like something was suffocating her from within. That evening, Ethan kissed her quickly before heading out with a suitcase in hand. "Client summit," he explained as he adjusted his cufflinks. "I'll be gone until Monday. We'll talk then, okay?" She didn't ask where. She didn't need to. She waited until his car pulled away before walking straight to her laptop. The GPS tracking still worked. The signal beeped softly from a remote luxury spa resort 3 hours away. And then came the confirmation. Juliana's Instagram story, freshly posted. A hand holding a champagne flute on a familiar terrace. The caption read, "Weekend bliss. Some people deserve it all." Amelia stared at the screen until it blurred through her tears. She couldn't breathe. She dropped to her knees beside the coffee table, her sobs finally erupting like a wave she could no longer hold back. Her body shook, and she clutched her stomach as if shielding her baby from the pain inside her chest. It wasn't just heartbreak, It was betrayal on a scale so intimate, so deliberate, that it tore something inside her soul. He had chosen this moment, when she was vulnerable, pregnant, fragile, to humiliate her in the most calculated way. For hours, she lay curled on the floor, letting the silence wrap around her like a shroud. But eventually, her sobs slowed. Her breathing evened. Her tears dried. She sat up slowly, placing a hand on her belly. "I'm so sorry you have to feel all this," she whispered. "But we're going to be okay. I promise you." Then she stood, wobbly, but determined. She walked to the dresser, pulled out a journal, and began to write everything down. The dates, the proof, the lies. She opened folders of screenshots. She organized her evidence. Her fingers moved with certainty. If Ethan and Juliana wanted to play games, so be it. But Amelia was done being a pawn. She looked at herself in the mirror, her face pale, her eyes swollen, but within that reflection was a woman who had survived the unthinkable. A woman ready to fight for her dignity. She whispered the words like a vow. "If they want to play games, I'll end it in front of everyone." And this time, there would be no escape for either of them. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of fanfare only the wealthy could conjure. The entrance to the Carlton Grand Hotel was bathed in golden light, the red carpet rolled out for politicians, CEOs, socialites, and celebrities. Expensive perfumes filled the air, heels clicked like music on marble floors, and the chatter buzzed with excitement. Waiters in white gloves floated through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was a scene of perfection, gilded, graceful, and dripping in wealth. Ethan arrived early, dressed immaculately in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo. His presence commanded attention, as always, but tonight he wasn't alone. On his arm was Juliana, introduced simply as his executive assistant. She wore a shimmering silver gown that clung to her like a second skin. Her hair was swept up in soft waves, and diamonds glinted on her ears and neck, perhaps purchased with Ethan's money, perhaps a gift from him directly. Guests smiled politely, but eyes lingered. Some wondered quietly why Amelia, his wife, wasn't with him this year. Others guessed too quickly. Juliana was charming. Too charming. She laughed softly, placed a delicate hand on Ethan's arm when he leaned close to speak. Her eyes flickered across the room like a queen surveying her court. She acted as if she belonged. As if Amelia had never existed. But she hadn't expected Amelia to come. Nearly an hour into the event, the air shifted. All eyes turned toward the entrance. There she stood, Amelia Blackwood, resplendent in a floor-length burgundy maternity gown that hugged her bump like a crown jewel. Her hair was swept back, her makeup simple but striking. She moved with the grace of a woman who knew all eyes were on her and welcomed it. A quiet wave of murmurs spread through the crowd like fire. She hadn't been on the guest list. No one had expected her. Yet here she was, every bit the wife of Ethan Blackwood, radiant and regal. Ethan saw her before Juliana did. His glass froze mid-air. Color drained from his face. He took a slow, uncertain step forward, as if unsure whether to run to her or run away. Juliana turned, her smile faltering for a split second. Just long enough. Amelia met their gazes with calm steel in her eyes. She smiled politely at the guests who greeted her, her voice soft but poised. "Good evening. I'm so happy I could make it tonight." She walked through the glittering crowd like a queen returning to her palace, her presence making every guest question why she wasn't the one by Ethan's side to begin with. Ethan tried to intercept her midway through the ballroom. "Amelia," he began, almost whispering. She stopped him with a hand gently placed on her belly. "We'll talk later," she said, her eyes flickering to Juliana before gliding past them both. The rest of the evening unfolded like a slow-burning fuse. Amelia sat at her own table, graciously speaking to board members and guests. Her composure was perfect. But behind her stillness, her heart pounded. Every smile exchanged between Ethan and Juliana, every whispered moment between them, it was all being watched, noted, recorded in her mind. They were trying to act discreet, but the glances, the subtle touches, were far too intimate for any assistant. Juliana grew more uneasy as the night went on. Her laugh became thinner, her eyes darting more frequently toward Amelia, who never stopped smiling. The confidence she arrived with slowly peeled away. She didn't know what Amelia was planning, but something in the woman's silence unsettled her deeply. Amelia didn't need to cause a scene, not yet. Her power came from the stillness, the restraint, the way she floated through the room like the rightful queen reclaiming her crown. She didn't speak of betrayal. She didn't scream accusations. But her presence alone whispered the truth into every ear around them. Behind her calm exterior, her hands clenched quietly beneath the tablecloth. In her clutch was a USB drive, copies of receipts, screenshots, and recordings. Her moment was coming. But not in the shadows. Not in whispers. When she stepped onto the stage, it would be her truth echoing from the speakers. She had come prepared. The only question left was, would Juliana still be smiling when the lights turned her way? Not likely. The air inside the ballroom had never been thicker. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above, casting golden light over a sea of glamorous gowns and designer tuxedos. Glasses clinked, whispers swirled, and the buzz of polite conversation filled the room as everyone waited for the highlight of the evening, Ethan Blackwood's annual keynote speech. He approached the stage with confidence, flashing a charming smile that had won over rooms like this one countless times before. Amelia watched from her seat, her hands resting gently on her belly, her breath steady. Every heartbeat echoed like a drumbeat in her ears. She had memorized this moment in her mind 100 times. And now, it was real. She watched as Ethan tapped the microphone and began. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. As always, it's an honor to stand before you, surrounded by the best our city has to offer. This evening is about more than donations. It's about values. It's about integrity. It's about family. Amelia stood. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she walked to the side of the stage. The sound alone was enough to cause a few heads to turn. Then more. Ethan's voice faltered. She moved with poise and purpose, her burgundy gown trailing elegantly behind her. Before anyone could question what was happening, she stepped up beside him, nodded once to the host holding a second microphone, and took it gently from his hand. The room grew silent. Before you continue, Ethan, Amelia said, her voice ringing clear and calm, I'd like to say a few words. Ethan's face turned pale. Amelia, this isn't. But she was already addressing the crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her smile gracious. You've all been supporters of this foundation, of this cause, and of my husband's mission for many years. I've been proud to stand beside him at every gala. Until tonight. A murmur rippled through the room. Ethan stepped forward, visibly uneasy. Amelia, now's not the time. She turned her gaze toward him, not with anger, but with a quiet strength that silenced him instantly. I think it's the perfect time, she said. She reached into her clutch and removed a small device. With a nod to the AV technician stationed near the stage, she handed it over. The room darkened slightly as the screens lit up. At first, there was just a black screen, and then, Ethan's voice. Soft. Tender. I miss you, baby. I wish I could hold you tonight. A hush fell over the crowd. I hate leaving your side. The way you laughed at dinner, that dress you wore. God, I can't stop thinking about you. Laughter from a woman followed. Juliana's laugh. Gasps erupted. Eyes turned toward Ethan, who stood motionless. Then toward Juliana, whose wine glass trembled in her hand. She stammered, barely above a whisper. That's fake. I don't know what that is. Amelia stepped forward again, her tone still even. That was recorded 3 weeks ago, the night Ethan told me he had a business meeting. But that wasn't all. The screen flickered again, photos this time. Ethan and Juliana, walking arm in arm at a private beach resort. Juliana leaning in, kissing his cheek. A close-up of a dinner plate with, to us, written in chocolate. A candid of Ethan holding her waist on a yacht. A collective gasp rolled through the room like thunder. Juliana's voice cracked. This is out of context. This doesn't mean. Amelia cut her off gently, producing one final item from her purse. A receipt. Dated 5 days ago. A luxury boutique downtown. Lingerie. Paid with Ethan's black card. Signed by you, Juliana. She walked closer and handed it to her, her tone sharp now. I imagine you forgot about this. Juliana's mask shattered. Her hand flew to her mouth, and the tears came fast. Not the graceful kind, the choking, hiccuping sobs of someone whose house of lies had collapsed around her. She dropped into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I didn't know he would. I thought he would leave her. Ethan stood frozen, humiliated beyond measure. His carefully crafted persona lay in ruins before the very crowd he had worked years to impress. His eyes flicked from Amelia to the audience to Juliana, but no words came. No defense. No apology. Amelia turned toward the crowd once more, her voice soft but unshakable. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. But I will not be silenced. I will not sit quietly while I'm made a fool of. I am 7 months pregnant with a daughter who deserves to grow up knowing what love is supposed to look like. She paused, her voice trembling just enough to reveal the pain beneath the power. You broke my heart. Both of you. But I will never let my daughter grow up thinking betrayal is love. The room stood in stunned silence. And then, as Amelia turned and walked off the stage, head held high, a few guests, then more, began to applaud. Not the polite, forced kind. But the kind that comes from witnessing something raw. Something brave. Something real. Amelia didn't look back. She had nothing left to prove. The fallout from the gala spread through social circles and media outlets like wildfire. What was meant to be a glamorous evening celebrating philanthropy had turned into a scandal of epic proportions. The whispers started before the night even ended, but by morning, headlines blared across gossip sites and business columns alike. Millionaire's wife exposes infidelity in shocking on-stage reveal. Pictures of Ethan's stunned expression, Juliana's tear-streaked face, and Amelia's poised silhouette at the microphone flooded the internet. It didn't take long before Juliana vanished from the public eye entirely. Her once active social media accounts were wiped clean. Endorsement deals she had quietly been securing behind closed doors vanished overnight. Invitations to high-profile events dried up, and acquaintances who once fawned over her now kept their distance. She had not just been exposed, she had been publicly unraveled. For weeks, rumors swirled that she had fled the city entirely. Some claimed she was staying with family in disgrace. Others said she had checked into a wellness retreat to find herself. But Amelia didn't care where she was. She was gone, and that was enough. Ethan, on the other hand, refused to go quietly. Within days of the gala, he began his campaign for redemption. Flowers arrived at Amelia's door daily, roses, lilies, orchids, along with handwritten letters filled with apologies. He called from blocked numbers, sent emails, even begged mutual friends to help him reach her. Each message was more desperate than the last, overflowing with regret and declarations of love. It was a mistake, he wrote. A terrible, stupid mistake. Please let me fix this. Amelia read none of them. She blocked every number. Deleted every message. She didn't need his apologies. Not now. Not after everything. Instead, she walked into her lawyer's office the following week and filed for divorce. The process was clean, swift, and executed with the kind of precision only a woman deeply wronged could summon. Her lawyer, a fierce advocate who had once helped survivors of domestic betrayal rebuild their lives, ensured Amelia would leave the marriage not just protected, but empowered. The prenup Ethan had once insisted upon now worked in her favor. She walked away with a generous settlement, full custody of her unborn child, and the deed to a beautiful townhouse nestled on the edge of the city. The new house wasn't grand like the mansion, but it was warm, personal, peaceful. Here, Amelia didn't have to walk past reminders of betrayal. Here, she didn't have to pretend. She decorated each room with soft pastels and calming tones, filling the space with plants, light, and laughter. But it was the nursery that became her favorite place. She painted the walls a pale lavender, hung tiny paper stars from the ceiling, and placed a rocking chair beside the window where morning sunlight streamed through. The crib was simple and white, with a plush bunny resting on the pillow. Shelves lined with picture books and stuffed animals waited patiently for a little girl who had already given her mother reason to survive. That nursery wasn't just for a child. It was a sanctuary. A promise. A symbol of everything Amelia had reclaimed. She would raise her daughter in truth, strength, and love, not in silence or shame. And as she stood in that quiet room, hand on her belly, she whispered to her unborn child, "This is where we begin again." Weeks after the gala scandal erupted, Juliana resurfaced in a desperate attempt to salvage what little remained of her public image. She appeared on a late-night talk show, her makeup minimal, her eyes red-rimmed as if to signal authenticity. She clutched a tissue in one hand and spoke in a trembling voice about how things got out of control, how she never intended to hurt anyone, and how the love she felt was real, even if it was complicated. The interview was meant to be her redemption arc, but it only deepened the public scorn. Clips from the show went viral, not for sympathy, but for mockery. Audiences weren't moved by her tears. They remembered the photos, the videos, the laughter shared in secret with a married man while his pregnant wife suffered in silence. Comments flooded social media, accusing her of playing the victim, of crying only because she got caught. Apologies that came after exposure felt hollow. No one was interested in forgiving her. Brands that once sponsored her dropped her immediately. Modeling gigs she had lined up vanished without explanation. PR agencies refused to represent her, and her inbox, once full of event invites and offers, became a graveyard of silence. The spotlight she once craved now burned her from afar, leaving her exposed and alone. Behind closed doors, Juliana unraveled. She stopped attending events, stopped posting online. Friends stopped calling. The people who once hovered around her like moths disappeared the moment her glow dimmed. Days passed in isolation, her once luxurious apartment now a quiet cage. She wandered from room to room in silence, unable to sleep, unable to eat. She stared at her reflection for hours, trying to recognize the woman who once believed she had it all. Late one night, curled up on her designer couch with a bottle of wine in one hand and a mess of tissues in the other, she whispered to the empty room, "I thought he'd leave her, but I was just his escape." There was no one to argue. No cameras. No praise. No Ethan. Only silence, and the sobering truth that she had gambled with another woman's life, and lost everything in the process. The hospital room was quiet, save for the gentle beeping of machines and the soft hum of night outside the window. Amelia lay back against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her hands trembling from exhaustion and overwhelming joy. In her arms rested a tiny, perfect baby girl, wrapped in a lavender blanket and blinking up at her mother with wide, curious eyes. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes as she whispered the name she had chosen weeks ago. Hope. The name felt right. It wasn't just a word, it was a promise. A new beginning. A light born from darkness. Hope had come into the world with 10 tiny fingers, a button nose, and a cry that shook Amelia to her core. And with that cry, Amelia felt something in herself shift, not break, not shatter, but awaken. All the grief, betrayal, and heartbreak that had nearly destroyed her were now part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She had something new to live for, to fight for, to build around. This child was her second chance. Lena was the first to visit. She rushed into the room with flowers and tears, wrapping Amelia in a fierce hug before turning to gaze at baby Hope. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." The support didn't end there. Amelia's new community, neighbors, friends, even strangers who had followed her story, rallied around her. Meal trains, nursery donations, and quiet acts of kindness filled her days. In their love, she rediscovered a joy she hadn't felt in years. Smiles came more easily. Laughter returned, light and real. But Amelia wanted more than just healing for herself. With the help of Lena and a small team of advocates, she launched a foundation dedicated to supporting women who had been abandoned during pregnancy. She named it the Hope Initiative. It offered legal resources, mental health support, and shelter programs, and quickly gained recognition for its compassion and impact. Exactly 1 year after Hope's birth, Amelia stood behind a podium at a prestigious women's empowerment conference. The same elite crowd that once gasped at her betrayal now rose in applause at her strength. She wore a tailored cream suit and carried herself with quiet confidence. In the front row sat Lena, beaming with pride. Beside her was a man Amelia had only recently met. Kind eyes, warm smile, and a gentle nature that made her heart flutter, just a little. Amelia took a deep breath and looked out across the audience. "There was a time I thought my life was over," she began. "I was shattered by betrayal. But here's what I've learned: sometimes, betrayal breaks us. But if you survive it, you rise. Stronger, freer, and whole." The applause that followed was thunderous. But Amelia didn't need the noise. She looked down at her daughter, asleep in Lena's arms, and knew she already had everything she needed. A new dawn had arrived, and it was hers to claim.